Today's video takes us to this location in Mesa, near Main and Power Road, and takes place in 1986. Back then it was the Super 8 motel. Staying at the motel were husband and wife Anthony and Susan Dina. Anthony was 26 and Susan 25. They were visiting from Pennsylvania to attend the wedding of Susan's best friend. They attended the wedding, and the very next day, on Sunday, June 8th, Anthony and Susan went down to the pool to sunbathe. They both sat in lounge chairs along the side of the pool and relaxed. At the same time, across the street was the Lost Alaskan bar. Inside, two men were causing some trouble. They were later identified as 39-year-old William Guy Foster and his friend George Rule. After being served once, they began harassing the bartender, making lewd comments, and when she refused to serve them a second time, they got loud, rowdy, began throwing glasses, upturning tables, making a mess, and even making threats. A few of the patrons ran out the back door. The manager of the bar yelled out to the men that the police were there or on their way. That's when both men bolted through the front door and ran to their car. And at the same time, one of the patrons, a 64-year-old man named Martin Olson, who had been at the bar drinking, went over to his car and pulled out a gun from the glove compartment. The two men had reached and started the vehicle, and they began to back up and squeal the tires and speed off. And as they were doing this, Martin Olson aimed his .32 caliber gun at their tires, and as they drove away, about 30 yards away, Anthony and Susan had heard the yelling and heard the squealing of the tires. Both of them had looked up, and as the car drove by, Anthony looked over at his wife, who had been on the receiving end of Martin Olson's bullet. She had been hit in the jaw. Anthony grabbed a towel and attempted to stop the bleeding, then ran toward the pool gate yelling that his wife had been shot. Olson, who had fired the shot, heard someone scream, "Oh my God, she's been shot, call the paramedics." He went back into the bar and told the manager, "I must have shot somebody, call the police." Paramedics arrived on the scene quickly and Suzanne was taken to the hospital, where she died not long after her arrival. The coroner would later say that the bullet entered her jaw and severed her spinal cord. When Martin Olson was told that Susan had died, he broke down. Martin Olson was a retired construction worker with emphysema and a regular at the Lost Alaskan bar. Martin Olson was charged with negligent homicide. He said he was trying to stop the two men from leaving. He expressed his remorse. His attorney said it was an accident and he was trying to be a good citizen. A deputy county attorney said he took the law into his own hands, and Susan paid the price. During the trial, which Susan's parents attended, Anthony testified, Martin Olson testified, and so did the bartender of the Lost Alaskan bar. Olson, who lived with his son, insisted he did not know anyone was in the line of fire when he aimed the .32 caliber gun. He said he carried the gun in his car for years for protection. Bartender Linda Dixon testified that two men had come in, she had served them, and then they began making lewd comments to her and threatened to rob the bar and started throwing glasses around at the bar and at customers when she refused to serve them a second time. Then Olson and other customers ran out the back door. The Lost Alaskan bar manager testified she was in the kitchen and heard the sound of glasses breaking and yelled out that the police had arrived. It was then that both men ran out the front door. Olson said, "I thought you just can't let people get away with that. I took careful aim. I made sure no one was in the line of fire. I'm sure of that. I didn't know what these men were going to do. They could have driven over to hit me. I wasn't taking any chances." Anthony Dina testified that after hearing yelling, he looked up in the direction of the noise to see a car racing down the street in front of him. He said, "Right when it got across from us, I thought they threw a firecracker at us. I watched the car turn the corner. Then I heard something dripping, and I looked at Sue." He then proceeded to explain how he tried to stop the bleeding. At the hospital, he said the doctor told him, "Mr. Dina, we're sorry. We did everything we could to save your wife, but we couldn't save her." Through his testimony, he didn't cry until he was shown a photo of his wife, to which he said, "That's my angel." Olson was offered a plea deal where he would spend 6 months in jail, but he declined it, saying that due to his ill health, he wouldn't be able to survive. On October 5th, 1986, Martin Olson was convicted of negligent homicide in the death of Susan Dina. In January of 1987, he was sentenced to 4 years in prison, but remained free on appeal. In 1988, his conviction was upheld, and he began his sentence. He was released in January 1992, having served 3 years. He died in 1996 at the age of 73. Martin Olson was survived by his wife, 3 sons, a sister, 2 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. He served in the Army and fought in World War II. He is buried at Arlington Park Cemetery in Pennsauken, New Jersey. Almost a year after her death, one of two men involved in the ruckus that started at the Alaskan bar was sentenced to a year in jail on a criminal damage conviction related to his part, also to 3 years probation. The judge told him he and his friend George Rule were responsible for the death of a charming young woman at the beginning of her life. According to an article in the Arizona Republic by Venita Hawthorne James, the 40-year-old George Rule could not be located, and I was unable to find any updates as to whether or not he was ever located or charged. In the year 2000, a fire broke out at the Lost Alaskan bar.
It couldn't be saved.
The cause of the fire was determined to be careless smoking, as it was most likely started in a trash can in the bar's office sometime after the bar had closed. This tragic event was highly publicized at the time, with Martin Olson getting a lot of sympathy because of his older age and very ill health.
And Susan's parents, they understood this. And even though Olson said that he wished that it was him who had been killed instead of Susan, they still felt that there needed to be some sort of justice for what this man had done.
That you can't take the law into your own hands. One question being, instead of grabbing the gun, why not just grab a pencil and write down the license plate? They came down from Pennsylvania and went to all of the hearings. There were a lot of articles about this story. Some talked about what Susan's parents went through, their experience through this unimaginable tragedy, their struggles, their reactions, and also about the two revisiting the site of the shooting. No one should have to go through what Tony Dina went through and losing his wife the way that he did. There wasn't a lot of information as to who Susan Dina actually was, but from the information I can find, she was a Sunday school teacher. She worked at a print shop and wrote poems that rhymed and had them printed at the shop and would give them away as gifts. She was 25 years old at the time of her death. She was survived by her husband, Tony, her parents, 2 sisters, a grandmother, nieces and nephews, and her mother-in-law. The burial site for Susan Lynn Dina is unknown.
I've taken away something from each of the stories that I have done and the victims and the families that I've read about. And one thing that has stood out to me has been the reaction of the loved ones in the family of the victims. How they have handled the pressure, the stress, the intense sense of pain and loss, and their courage and their strength and their determination to carry on through incredibly horrific tragedies has blown me away. And I've taken away a piece of that for each story. I believe that a lot of victims have given strength to others that they won't know about, but by just carrying on the way that they have and fighting the way that they have, it has helped others, and it will continue to. It's helped me. Susan Dina is known, and she is proudly remembered and not forgotten.
And this is the location as it appears today of what was once the Super 8, changed names over the years, where a happily married, wonderful young woman lost her life.